Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise and really get to the heart of things. And today, we're focusing on something I think a lot of educators out there feel deep down, that overwhelming pressure, the sheer exhaustion, that feeling where you start to wonder, did I lose that spark, the reason I got into teaching in the first place? The love of seeing a kid's eyes light up, helping them learn, grow, discover things. It's tough. Schedules are jammed. Classes might be getting bigger. And sometimes it really does feel like you're just stuck in a system built for, well, another time. Maybe not the best fit for the curious kids sitting right in front of you. But what if? What if there was a way to get that spark back? Not by adding more to your plate, goodness knows you don't need that, but by fundamentally changing how learning happens. Imagine creating a classroom that feels more alive, more student-driven, something that energizes you, even with that packed schedule, even if, your admins may be a little hesitant. This deep dive, it's for you, the teacher who's giving their all but maybe feeling the weight. We're going to explore how Agile and Scrum, those terms you hear from the tech world, might actually radically transform your classroom, how they can bring back some of that joy, that discovery for your students and for you. Our main guide today is the Agile Educator Guide Free Edition by Michael Vizdos. It's a fantastic starting point, really practical. We'll also pull in some really key ideas from his Agile in Education 21st Century Learning today and the Agile in Education Compass from agileaneducation.org. Really powerful stuff there. And we'll get some real-world context from scruminschool.org too, which talks about Vizdos' journey, how he's actually put this stuff into practice in school. So our mission today, simple. We unpack these resources, we pull out the core ideas, make them actionable, and we specifically tackle the big hurdles you might face. Like, how do you deal with burnout? How do you talk to skeptical administrators? We'll show you how these agile ways might not just bring back your love for teaching, but also help you build a really solid case for making positive changes in your school. Sound good? Let's jump in. All right, first things first. We need to unpack the why. Understanding the root of the problem is key, especially when you're feeling drained. So that traditional classroom, the one we mostly know, what does scruminschool.org say about where it came from? And maybe more importantly, its impact on how kids actually learn. It's quite a critique, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. It doesn't pull any punches. Scruminschool.org puts it bluntly. Our current education system, pretty much worldwide, is essentially a relic of the industrial age. Just think about that for a second. An era all about mass production, standardization, doing the same thing over and over for efficiency. Strict hierarchies, the goal back then. Churning out compliant workers for factories. People who followed orders didn't ask too many questions. And the source argues that in many ways this system is still teaching students to do not think critically, do not question authority, do not learn the love of learning. And maybe the saddest part, do not create or explore new ideas. It's designed to produce a specific output, not foster thinkers who are adaptable, innovative self-starters for the world we actually live in now. It's kind of stuck on delivering content rather than sparking real understanding or curiosity.
Wow. That's pretty chilling when you frame it like that. And you can immediately see how that connects to how teachers feel, right? If you're working inside that kind of rigid top-down system where it's all about covering the material, hitting the test benchmarks, it's no wonder it leads to exhaustion. You start feeling like a conveyor of knowledge, just pushing information down the line, not really facilitating discovery. And when your main job feels like just getting through the curriculum, meeting deadlines for tests, that initial spark, that joy in seeing kids have those aha moments, it just fades. It becomes less about the magic and more about checking boxes. Kind of strips away the very reason you wanted to teach in the first place, doesn't it? To inspire, not just instruct.
Exactly. That feeling of being a human conveyor belt, the one who has to dispense all the information. It's incredibly draining. Leads straight to that burnout you mentioned. But right there, that's where Agile Education offers such a refreshing alternative. The Agile in Education 21st Century Learning today. Source invites us to imagine something totally different. Imagine a classroom where the lesson plan was something that they helped to craft. The students. Picture whiteboards just cluttered with handwritten sticky notes of student ideas, theories, and questions. A living, breathing record of their own exploration. It paints a picture of this dynamic space. Kids from all different backgrounds, innovating, discovering, wrestling with ideas, even disagreeing constructively, and then figuring out how to bring their different views together to solve problems. It's learning as an active, sometimes messy, collaborative adventure, not just sitting there passively getting facts poured into their heads.
Okay, now that's interesting, especially for that teacher listening right now, maybe feeling totally burnt out, feeling like they've lost that passion. This sounds like a real antidote. So how does this vision connect back to the core reason teachers teach? That love of actually helping kids learn, grow, and really thrive.
It connects directly to the heart of it. When students get even a little bit of power to help shape their learning, and it can start small, it creates what the source calls agency. Suddenly, they're not just consumers. They're active producers of their own education. It introduces social challenge in a good way. They learn to navigate group work, communicate better, see different viewpoints, skills they absolutely need for life, right? Not just school. And this way of working organically conjures opportunities to solve their own problems. Because when they own it, they're more invested in figuring things out. For the teacher, your role shifts dramatically. You're not the constant director, the content pusher. You become a guide, a facilitator, a coach, a mentor. And that fosters this deep sense of purpose for everyone, students and teachers, because it's about real engagement, tackling real challenges, growing together, not just memorizing stuff. And the source makes a point to say there's a whole community of Agile educators out there. They exist specifically to help design these kinds of classrooms. Classrooms that curate discovery, embrace learning that's transparent, and help students grow their Agile capacity through choice and collaboration. It's about creating a space where everyone can rediscover the joy of real, meaningful learning. And to really anchor this why, to give us a kind of North Star for this whole journey, there's the Agile in Education Compass. It's described as the set of guiding principles behind Agile education. It wasn't just made up by one person. It was created by a group of really passionate educators, including Michael Visdos. They saw the need for a new direction. And its core idea is simple but profound. The world is no longer predictable, and learning needs to be more adaptive, connected, and interdependent. So the compass basically says, okay, the world changed. Education needs to change too. It needs agility. It's like a set of values for teaching in the 21st century.
Yeah, and what really jumped out at me thinking about our listener, that teacher feeling weighed down by the old ways, is the your journey from section of that compass. It spells out the mindset shift so clearly. Let's touch on a few of those because they seem to directly push back against that burnout feeling. First, it talks about moving from content at culture. Learning starts with why.
Yeah.
It's the big story. That's huge, right? It means learning isn't just about ticking off curriculum points anymore. It's about embedding it in real experience, making it meaningful, making it stick. You know how kids always ask, why do we need to learn this?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Right. Well, in an Agile classroom, the why isn't just an answer you give them. It's the foundation they build on. It shifts learning from feeling like a chore to feeling like a mission. And that totally changes the dynamic. It speaks directly to the teacher's why, too. It's not just what you teach, but why it matters. It has to reignite some passion, right? Building something bigger.
Absolutely. Connects the learning to purpose.
Then there's evaluation, visible feedback, and reflection, nurturing the love of lifelong learning. So moving away from just the big final test being the be-all and end-all. Instead, it's this continuous, open process. When you partner with students, give them clear feedback they can actually see and build in time for them to reflect. It catalyzes continuous growth and ownership. Learning becomes this ongoing thing focused on getting better, not just getting a grade. And having that feedback loop built in where progress is visible, that seems like it could take some pressure off the teacher around those high-stakes tests. Assessment becomes a tool for learning, not just of learning.
Precisely. It's formative, not just summative.
And this last one feels really key for both burnout and student agency. Control trust, valuing the freedom of discovery. This hits right at empowering students, giving them room for, as it says, human diversity and boosting their agency and self-direction. It's about letting go of needing to micromanage everything, trusting students to explore, make choices, figure things out. And when you do that, it totally changes your role. You shift from being the rule enforcer, the deadline police, to being a trusted guide, a mentor, a coach. You get to facilitate discovery, not just dictate facts. And isn't that why most people get into teaching? To spark that curiosity?
It absolutely is. And what's so fascinating when you look at the compass overall is how it just completely reorients the purpose of education. It moves away from just delivering content, which, let's be honest, can feel dry and exhausting for everyone involved, towards building this vibrant culture, a culture of a real motivation, continuous growth. It's such a powerful antidote to that feeling of just getting through the day or the unit or the year. When learning becomes this shared adventure where everyone's genuinely engaged, the whole energy in the room shifts. And that new energy, that collaboration, it can be incredibly restorative for a teacher who's feeling totally depleted. It replaces that exhaustion with excitement, with purpose. It literally brings the joy back.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the why. Why the old system can lead to burnout, why Agile education offers this really compelling, rejuvenating vision. Now let's get practical. Let's talk what and how. That Agile Educator Guide we mentioned, it's designed to be super hands-on. It calls itself a quick start approach, which sounds pretty good to an overwhelmed teacher, and it breaks things down into two main chunks, the learning sprint and the spectrums of choice and collaboration. Let's dig into the learning sprint first. You called it the engine earlier. Sounds important.
It absolutely is the core engine. The guide defines it as an iterative and time-boxed learning cycle composed of 5 self-directed learning routines. Okay, let's unpack that. Iterative just means it repeats. It's a cycle. You do it, you learn, you do it again, building on what you did before. Think like mini projects, not one long slog. Time-boxed means it has a strict deadline, a fixed length. The guide suggests not exceeding 4 weeks. This short cycle is really key. It means you get feedback often, you can catch problems early, and there are tons of chances to improve and adapt as you go. When one sprint ends, the next one starts right up. So you get this continuous flow, this momentum building.
Okay, a continuous flow. That sounds way better than projects dragging on forever, losing steam. So let's walk through these 5 routines inside the sprint. What are they and how do they actually give students more agency while also supporting the teacher? Let's break them down. First one is refinement. What's that about?
Refinement is basically the routine of clearly expressing, prioritizing, and breaking down objectives into smaller achievable chunks, getting things ready for future sprints. The guide says this can happen anytime, really. It keeps a steady flow of well-defined work ready to go. For students, this is where they start learning to set their own goals, maybe help decide the order of things, break down big ideas into smaller steps. Imagine students actively helping shape what they learn and when. That's empowering. It shifts them from just being told what to do. And for the teacher, it means maybe less time mapping out every single minute in advance and more time coaching students on how to plan and break down tasks themselves.
Okay, so less upfront planning burden, more guiding. I like that. What's next?
Then comes planning. This is where a new sprint officially kicks off. Students figure out what will be achieved by the end of the sprint and how the work will be accomplished. Hala. The guide mentions 3 steps: why, what, and how. The why sets a clear goal for the sprint, often like an essential question, gives it meaning, purpose. The what is where they choose the specific learning objectives, the learning backlog items they'll tackle in this sprint. And the how, that's them, the students, breaking those items into smaller tasks, figuring out who does what, how they'll get it done. They learn to interpret objectives, break down work, set goals, maybe even estimate effort. It's like project management for their own learning. Huge life skill.
Right. So they're not just doing the work, they're planning it too. Next routine.
The check-in. This is crucial. It's a short, frequent chat, maybe 5-15 minutes max, all about checking progress towards that sprint goal. It's time for students to sync up, see how things are going, adapt if needed, flag any problems, and help each other out. You often hear those 3 questions. What did you get done since last time? What will you do next? And the big one, any roadblocks? Need help? Oh, this is massive for students learning to monitor themselves, spot problems early, ask for help, and be accountable. And for the teacher, think about the relief. Instead of constantly chasing kids down, trying to figure out who's stuck, these quick, student-led checks give you a real-time pulse, and students start solving their own problems more.
Okay, that sounds like a huge time saver and stress reducer right there. Constant, quick updates instead of guesswork. What follows the check-in?
After the ongoing check-ins, near the end of the sprint, you have the review. This is where students show what they've learned, demonstrate the actual work. They take a completed learning backlog item and show how it meets the success criteria, those clear standards they agreed on earlier for what done looks like. When an item passes muster, it becomes a progress increment, tangible proof of learning. Could be anything: a working model, a finished essay paragraph, a solved math problem. The review lets students present their work, check it against the criteria, and really importantly, give and get feedback. They learn to improve based on that input. It makes assessment feel more like a collaboration focused on growth, not just a final grade. Builds that sense of accomplishment too.
Visible progress, clear criteria, feedback.
Yeah, that sounds much more constructive than just a red pen mark.
Okay.
One routine left. The final one is the retrospective. Now, the review looks at the work, the product. The retrospective looks at the process. How do we learn? How do we make choices? How did we collaborate as a team? It's about reflecting on how things went and committing to improvements for the next sprint. This is huge for building what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about your own thinking and learning. Students practice self-reflection, figuring out how to resolve conflicts, give and get useful feedback, analyze group dynamics. They actively plan how to get better next time, build problem-solving skills, resilience, a growth mindset, and again, for the teacher, imagine students taking ownership of improving their own learning process, identifying what worked, what didn't, proposing solutions themselves. That frees up so much of your mental energy. You're not the only one troubleshooting anymore.
Wow. Okay. Those 5 routines, refinement, planning, check-in, review, retrospective, they really create a structured cycle. But you mentioned artifacts too, things that make it visible.
Yes, exactly. To make all this work, an Agile educator ensures visible artifacts are used. These are like the shared tools, the dashboards that support the learning, the choice, the collaboration throughout the sprint. They make everything transparent. There are 7 key ones. First, the learning backlog. Think of it as the master list for a whole unit or course. It's adaptable, prioritized, visible, maybe on a whiteboard or a shared doc. It shows all the goals, skills, projects, the big picture roadmap. Second, a learning backlog item. That's just one single thing on that big list, an objective, a standard, a skill, whatever. And each item has success criteria. That's the third artifact. This is the clear, specific evidence that shows the item is actually done. No ambiguity. Everyone knows what good looks like.
Okay, so backlog is the whole list. Item is one thing on the list. Criteria is how you know it's done. Got it. What else?
Fourth is the sprint backlog. This is the plan specifically for the current sprint. What items did we choose? How will we do them? Often you see this on a Kanban board, columns like to do, doing, done. It's visual, updated constantly. Everyone sees the progress in real time. Fifth, the progress increment. This is the actual thing that gets produced when a learning backlog item is finished and meets its success criteria. It's the proof, the presentation, the code, the essay, the solved problem, tangible evidence of learning. And then the last 2 are really interesting, especially for managing implementation and student growth, the spectrum of choice and the spectrum of collaboration. These are basically frameworks, like scales with 5 levels each, that help you define, measure, and slowly increase how much choice and collaboration students handle. We'll definitely dive deeper into those because they're key for managing change.
Okay, so let's connect this back. For that teacher feeling totally swamped, maybe drowning in grading and planning, how does having all this stuff, the routines, these visible artifacts like backlogs and sprint boards, actually help? It sounds like a lot to set up initially.
That's a fair point. There is some initial setup. But think about the payoff. This structure, this transparency, it actually reduces the feeling of chaos. Instead of constantly juggling emails, checking notebooks, trying to remember who's doing what, the progress is just there, visible to everyone, on the board, in the shared doc. It makes managing everything much easier. You can see at a glance where support is needed. But more importantly, it empowers the students to manage themselves more. They see the plan, they update their progress, they run their check-ins. It shifts a huge chunk of that organizational monitoring mental load off your shoulders and onto a shared visible system. It's like having a dynamic classroom dashboard that everyone uses. That frees you up immensely.
Less chaos, more student self-management. That definitely sounds like a win for a burnt-out teacher. Okay, so we see the structure. Now, how do you actually start implementing this? Especially if you're worried about pushback or it feeling like too much too soon. Those spectrums you mentioned sound key here.
They absolutely are. We've got the why, fighting burnout, reigniting passion. We've got the what, the sprints, the artifacts. Now the how. And those spectrums of choice and collaboration, they are your secret weapons. Especially for that exhausted teacher. They're tools for building capacity not just in students, but for yourself too, by managing the change gradually. The core idea behind them is simple. Student capacity to make choices and collaborate is developed through practice and support. It doesn't happen overnight. And crucially, the guide says the levels can be iteratively adjusted to scaffold growth while mitigating cognitive overload, meaning you dial it up or down as needed. It's not, as you said, throwing them in the deep end. It's a careful, structured climb.
Okay, that's really reassuring.
Right.
Because the worry is real, right? Overwhelming yourself, overwhelming the kids, or maybe getting serious side-eye from your principal. So this isn't flipping a switch day one. It's gradual. You can ease into it.
Exactly. And that gradual nature is precisely how you address those administrative concerns. Fears about losing control, standard slipping, classroom chaos. The spectrums let you start small, demonstrate success, build trust. Let's look at choice first.
Yeah, let's tackle that big one. Loss of control chaos. Admin sees student choice and might immediately picture anarchy, curriculum going out the window. How does the spectrum of choice help a teacher counter that fear, starting small?
It counters it beautifully because it shows a clear progression, starting very much within the teacher's control. Let's look at the low levels. Level 1 is observing. Here, the teacher directs students on what to do, choosing for them. Students follow. Simple. The teacher might be using the sprint structure, the artifacts might be visible, but the teacher makes all the calls. Students are aware, they see the process, but it's teacher-driven. An administrator walking in would see a very structured, teacher-led classroom. Familiar territory.
Okay, so level 1 looks pretty traditional on the surface, but you're laying the groundwork.
Precisely. Then level 2 is actively imitating. Here, the teacher shares different paths. Students give feedback, teacher listens, and ultimately chooses, explaining the decision-making. So maybe the teacher says, okay, for this part, you could do A or B. What do you think? They listen, but they still make the final call and explain why. Students are starting to see options, give input, understand the thinking behind choices. Still teacher-controlled, but a step towards engagement.
Right, so you can start right there, maybe level 1 or 2. We're introducing the idea of choice, the structure, without any actual loss of control. You're building student capacity step by step, proving it can be organized. That's a much easier sell to admin than just saying, let the kids choose.
Exactly. You demonstrate competence and control at the lower levels first, and then, as students show they can handle it, you gradually move up. Level 3, contributing, is where teacher and students both bring options and agree together. Level 4, choosing. Students identify options and choose with teacher coaching. And level 5, creating, is full student ownership. They identify options, choose the path, and just pull the teacher in for advice when needed. And remember, the guide stresses that Agile classrooms, regardless of which level, can utilize the learning sprint and visible learning artifacts. That structure, that transparency, it's always there. It provides accountability, which directly addresses those admin fears about standards.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for managing the choice aspect. What about the other big concern, difficulty with group work, uneven contribution? This is a classic headache, right? Admins worry, teachers worry. How do you ensure everyone pulls their weight? How do you avoid the usual group work pitfalls? How does the spectrum of collaboration help there?
Yeah, group work can be tough if not structured well. The guide tackles this by stating up front, collaboration as a skill could be grown through frequent practice. You have to teach it, nurture it, and Agile education builds that practice right into the learning sprint. It's not an occasional add-on, it's woven in. And again, it's scaffolded using the spectrum. Level 1 is individual, pretty straightforward. Students work mostly alone, little to no peer support. This is your baseline. Everyone does their own work. Accountability is clear. Admin feels comfortable here. Then level 2 is supportive. Here, individuals are still responsible for their own work, but students receive some support and feedback from peers. Maybe they pair up for 10 minutes to brainstorm or give quick feedback on a draft, then go back to working alone. The group interaction is temporary, low stakes, a gentle introduction to working with others.
Okay, so again, starting really simply. Individual work first, then maybe just quick peer feedback. Not launching straight into massive team projects where things can go off the rails. You build the skills first. That feels much more manageable for the teacher and less risky in terms of those common group work problems.
Exactly. Build the foundation. Then you can move up. Level 3 is cooperative. Here you have temporary groups, maybe for one sprint. Responsibilities are divided. You do this part, I do that part, working towards a shared goal. Like a relay team. Level 4 is collaborative. Now the teams are stable, maybe for several sprints. The whole team shares responsibility for all the work. Roles might shift. Trust builds. You often need a facilitator here. True shared ownership. And level 5 is communicative. That's multiple teams working together on an even bigger goal, coordinating their efforts, like different departments in a company. And the guide gives practical tips, like keeping groups small, 3 to 5 members for better communication, and keeping teams stable when possible, because trust grows from knowing one's team members well. This structured approach, building collaboration skills deliberately, directly addresses those concerns about fairness, accountability, and students learning to actually work together effectively.
This all sounds incredibly thoughtful, like a real path forward. But let's circle back to that core issue for our listener, the exhaustion, the workload. We said this could help, but honestly, setting up sprints, artifacts, managing spectrums, doesn't that sound like more work, at least initially? How does this actually reduce the burden long term? Because fixing the burnout is the goal here.
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And yes, there's an upfront investment in learning and setting up the system, can't deny that. But the long-term payoff comes from that fundamental shift we talked about, building student capacity and ownership. As you move students up those spectrums of choice and collaboration, they start doing more of the work that currently falls entirely on you. Think about it. Instead of you being the sole director, level 1 choice. Constantly pushing, monitoring, reminding, students start taking ownership. They run their own check-ins. They update the sprint backlog. They identify their own roadblocks. They reflect on their process in retrospectives and suggest improvements. Your role shifts from constantly doing everything to facilitating, coaching, guiding, empowering. You step back from micromanaging the process and focus on supporting the learning. It frees up enormous amounts of your time and mental energy. Instead of juggling 30 individual progress points, you're looking at a visible system that students are helping to maintain. You're building independent learners, and independent learners require less moment-to-moment direction from you. That's how it reduces the burden.
Okay, so the upfront effort pays off by creating a more self-sufficient classroom ecosystem, shifting the load. That makes sense. And you're not inventing this from scratch in isolation, right? That teacher feeling overwhelmed isn't alone on this journey. The guide itself is a quick start. You mentioned that community of Agile educators. And Michael Visdos's site, scruminschool.org, has case studies, examples. There's support out there.
Absolutely critical. You're joining a movement, tapping into collective wisdom and experience. People have navigated these challenges before. And for administrators or district leaders listening, the guide points them to edvision.com. That's focused on the operation side, showing how this scales beyond a single classroom, thinking about district-wide support and implementation. Even though one specific certification, the CLK-12, was discontinued by the Scrum Alliance end of 2023, the core work absolutely continues. The guide mentions places like Blueprint Education School District and others globally are still doing this work, refining it, proving it works. The methods are very much alive and evolving.
So the support structure is there, from practical guides to communities to district-level resources. That's really encouraging. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen how Agile education, using things like the learning sprint routines and those spectrums of choice and collaboration, offers this really structured yet flexible way to move past that old industrial model. It seems like it tackles teacher burnout head-on by getting students more engaged, giving them ownership, reconnecting everyone to the purpose of learning. And critically, it provides that gradual step-by-step path using the spectrums, which helps address those admin worries about control, standards, and just generally making sure it works effectively. It builds a case for change.
It really does offer a coherent framework. And that brings us to a final thought. If the Agile in Education Compass is right, if the world is no longer predictable, if learning does need to be more adaptive, connected, and interdependent, then think about the deeper passion, that why we teach, that could be unlocked when we really empower students. When we stop seeing them as empty vessels to fill and start seeing them as discoverers of the world and ourselves, as the compass puts it. What becomes possible then? So for you, listening right now, maybe feeling that fatigue, that sense of, is this all there is? Consider this. What's one tiny step you could take this week? Just one small thing. Maybe introduce one visible artifact. Just put up a simple learning backlog for your next unit. Or try offering the level 1 or level 2 choice from the spectrum. Maybe students choose between 2 ways to practice a skill. Just try one small thing and then watch. Observe what happens. Notice even a tiny shift in student engagement, in their ownership. And then, maybe more importantly, notice how you feel. Does it bring back even a flicker of that energy, that spark you thought might be gone? It's probably still there, waiting to be reignited. One small, agile step at a time.